My name is Wendy Doyle, and I serve as the CEO of the Women's Foundation, and I want to tell you about the Appointments Project. The Appointments Project is a result of a research study that the Women's Foundation commissioned with the University of Kansas, and the study demonstrated two significant points that I want you to know about. The first point is the number one reason that women are not civically involved is they simply have not been asked. And when they think of how they give of their time, they give through a charitable organization, their children's school, or even their church. So to think about how they can contribute back to their community, civic engagement is simply not top of mind. The second reason that women are not involved civically is confidence factor. And women feel that they simply do not have leadership skills or the knowledge or expertise to really contribute back to their community, back to their state, and simply just think that they are not of value. And so the Appointments Project evolved as a result of the research study because we want to encourage women to become involved civically. And the Appointments Project is an opportunity for women to apply through the Women's Foundation. And you can do so by clicking on a link on our website on the Appointments Project. You apply, the Women's Foundation will serve as an advocate and advisor to you to help you get appointed to local government, to state government, civic engagement opportunities. And I'd like to encourage you to do a couple of things. One, go to our website and learn more about our research study. Really identify and relate to what the opportunities and barriers that we identified through the study. The second is I would like to personally invite you to apply to our Appointments Project and really take your civic engagement as a responsibility to make a difference for communities to thrive. And I'd like to invite you to personally do so. So join me and be a part of this initiative to encourage more women to become civically engaged.
All right, I'm delighted to introduce to you our panel members. And you'll see, first of all, they have very long resumes, and if I read them all to you, then we would have no time for questions. So I've abbreviated quite a bit. But I'm going to give you the names and who they are, going from my left, which would be your right. And right here is Mrs. Diane Cleaver, and she's a civic leader in the community, and many of you know that. She's a community activist and has over 30 years experience working in health, human services, and education. She is a licensed psychologist and is the executive director of the Urban Neighborhood Initiative, an organization formed to implement one of the Kansas City Chamber of Commerce's 5 big ideas, revitalizing neighborhoods in the urban core. Next to Diane is councilperson Jan Markison, who's a member of the Kansas City Council. She's chair of the council's Finance, Governance, and Ethics Committee, and is a member of the Legislative Committee. She continues to be actively involved in EPA-mediated sewer overflow control plan. Doesn't sound like much fun. Pension reform, which Cecilia will know something about, and ensuring that the city budget is balanced. All big jobs. Next to Jan Markison is Judge Ann Mesley. She was appointed to the Jackson County Circuit Court in November of 2000 and served as a circuit judge until her retirement from the bench in August of 2013. But as you'll find, you're always a judge even after you retire. While she was on the bench, she served for several years on many different boards, but most particularly the Board of Trustees of Park University, and she currently serves as the chairman of the Board of Trustees of Park University. Next to Judge Mesley is Donna L. Stevenson, and did I say that right?
Absolutely perfect.
Good. She's a senior specialist with NeighborWorks America in the Organizational Assessment Division. She has 10 plus years in community development experience and 13 years of experience in the telecom environment. Donna currently serves as the chair of the Kansas City Neighborhood Tourism Development Fund. I suspect that has something to do with the Republican National Convention, maybe not. No. Okay. That was just my
Good try, everyone's trying.
I'm
Now-
sure they'll be hit up for money.
Now, this is obviously these ladies have got some experience working in the community, and hopefully they can give you answers. And I'm going to ask them some questions, and as we go along, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand and we'll try to do that. We'll definitely have time at the end for questions. So the first thing I want you all to talk about a little is, from your perspective, what do you want this audience to know about civic engagement and why the Women's Foundation Appointments Project is important? Why should we spend our time? So any of you can start. Diane, you're welcome to start, but anybody else has an idea, they can go.
Well, I would say civic engagement is important because it really changes the character of a community. It can change the character of a community based on who is involved, who's making the decisions. So who's at the table in terms of civic engagement impacts what the dialogue is like, the decision-making process, and what decisions are made. And our boards and commissions make very important and impactful decisions throughout our, that impact our community. I think the other part of that, to me it's like voting, the number of people who vote, really says something about the civic character of your community. But the other thing is what it does for you personally. You grow, you learn. You may come in knowing something about the area that you're in, but you learn more, you really grow personally. It really changes you. And you get to meet some interesting, diverse people that you may not otherwise have met. So I think those are just some of the advantages. I can stop, or if you want to, why the Women's Foundation should do this is because engagement of women, or those who haven't traditionally been engaged, it's not, an organic process. It doesn't happen necessarily on its own. That's the reason we need affirmative action, which I very much support in other areas. But for women, you need the same thing. Boards and commissions are often, when you add to them, you tend to ask those who are on the board or commission who would be good to fill in, and you tend to get more of the same, not because anyone has any bad intentions or malice or, I just selected someone to work on some work groups on something I'm working on. And I, came up with 3 names, and I stepped back and looked, they were all black women. Well, why is that? Not because I don't want men or I don't want more whites. That's who's most closely in my circle, who I know most about, so I know what they were doing, I know their background. So without some affirmative, real proactive work on this, we'll tend to perpetuate, boards and commissions that are like the boards and commissions we always had.
I totally agree with everything Diane said. I think for me, I've always been very civically engaged. I have no idea why. I wasn't really a joiner until after maybe it's because I had kids and I loved, having the babysitter and going out and doing fun things in the evening. But I have learned about so many different subjects. When Kathy was saying I was working on the sewer overflow control plan, I never thought I would know anything about our sewer system. You get these opportunities for skills or for knowledge that you never would have gotten before. Also, not everybody is a joiner, and not everyone can be civically engaged, so you really act as an ambassador. You can spread good information. There's so much misinformation out there, so if you are actively involved in a board and commission, you can really help make sure that the message gets out to many of your constituent groups. And it is a really good way to meet people from all walks of life, all ethnic groups, all ages, and it just makes you a stronger person.
Stronger person. I like that.
I think so.
First thing is, when I listen to the work that y'all are doing, and Cecilia, I happen to know more about the pension commission that she's on than I would ever thought I would without serving on it. That is a brutal That's a brutal job. I mean, but she has the background and experience to do it. I know the urban initiatives are really important to the Chamber of Commerce, and they are determined to make a difference. And I could go through, except I don't know y'all's, I read about you, but but I don't know the details. But I know that those are things that have to be done. So number one, what we're doing is critically important to the community. And I believe what I do at Park is critically important to making education better. I mean, we've got to, I could give you a whole lecture just on why it is that making education better as we change the world is worth every minute of the time that I spend on there. So, make the world better. Be at the table. When Diane talks about that, you have to have women, people of color, whatever it is that you bring to the table, we need that at the table. No matter how much we may love our husbands, you know, our male friends, if it is only men at the table, they cannot hear our voice. They simply can't hear it. No matter how much they may want to, they don't hear it. So we need to be at the table. And then, in my opinion, and this may go to a different question, we have to support each other at the table. If Kathy said, Kathy and I have done this before at bar meetings, if Kathy says, this is an important initiative, and some man says, somebody, anybody, I don't mean to criticize them overly, let's get back to the subject at hand, I need to say, this is the subject at hand. So being at the table also includes connecting with each other at the table. And then you can't understate or overstate, can't understate the responsibility, by the way, as I learned by the many hours I spent today on one of my boards. You can't understate the responsibility. You can't overstate either how much you gain from it. I know how to read financials. I never had to do that really in my job, a little bit as a judge, but I know how to read financials because I've got to read financials. I got to know what is going on with the budget. I have to be able to work with a very, very diverse group of people at different levels of any organization. You learn that, and the people who are newer in their careers, everything you do on a board or commission strengthens you personally. It helps you develop allies, alliances, self-esteem, some critical skill sets. And I will quote Cleaver at least once. That probably a couple times because, you know, usually Diane isn't here, and so I can say whatever Cleaver quote I want to, and no one knows if it's right or wrong. But you know, service is the rent we pay for the place we have on earth. And I believe that, and I can't imagine anybody involved with the Women's Foundation who does not believe that. It is our job to serve our communities and our fellow men, women. It's our job, and so it's a win-win. Win-win.
Thank you. To me, being civically involved means we're empowered as women. We walk around talking about no one listens to us because I'm a woman. I mean, how many times do you are in a conference room filled with men and your comment is an oversight, and then you're there for a couple hours and then your idea comes up and it's like, oh my gosh, I said that 10 minutes ago, or I said that an hour ago. I mean, we've all lived it. And so, to me, being civically engaged means that we're empowered. Now, we'll take that a step further by sharing that there are individuals who, or as women, there are 40% of us I'm a single mom, so 40% of us as women control the house or income. That's American. I don't know what the demographics is here, but that's what I do. And so the bottom line is I control the checkbook and the pen. And so when I am with like-minded people and they're individuals who have a common passion towards something, then we can also write the check for that. And that's my perspective. So I would encourage everyone to get involved. I am the chair of the Kansas City Neighborhood Tourism Development Fund Committee. It has been a wonderful, rewarding experience. I would not trade it for anything in the world. We have, and I know this is a different question, but you will have challenges. I'll share that with you in a little bit. But please, I would encourage you to get engaged.
Thank you. The research that was mentioned earlier suggests that women are often leaders in their church and in the schools. How do those skills, those leadership skills, translate into citywide boards and commissions?
I'll start on this one because I was president of the Parents Guild at St. Paul, so I had done some of that, but I can strongly recommend the junior league training that I had. And as a junior league member, you learn how to run a meeting. Running a meeting is one of the most important skills you can learn. If you can set the agenda, keep people on track, keep the conversation moving productively, and that's a skill a lot of men don't have, I must say. They love to hear themselves talk. I'm not disparaging men, but to chair a meeting, I think, is a skill that every woman really needs to learn to do, and it's pretty basic, but it's just shocking how few people have that. So I'd say a training organization that is female, because then you can test it out in a safe, supportive environment. And sometimes, you have to be told, well, you could do it a little bit differently. And it's very, it seems like women have more constructive criticism rather than kind of plotting behind your back. Not always. But I do think that type of training in just organizing a meeting is one of the best skills that you could have if you're serving on a board or commission.
I think paralleling that, one of the messages I always give my daughter is that the ability to speak, which is critical to the ability to lead anything, but including leading a meeting. The ability to speak in front of a group of people, large or small, it isn't dependent on being a great speaker. It's simply dependent upon being willing to do it and being prepared, being organized, being short with your comments. So, in my opinion, a leader is a leader is a leader. And if you can lead a school board meeting or a PTA, you can lead anything. It's a matter of maturing and development. I mean, I'm not suggesting that it's not. But once you learn to communicate with people comfortably, to speak your voice in a group, this size or any other size, you know how to prepare, you know how to dig in. You can transfer that from the school, churches, to any other organization in which you want to participate, except that one. And she's an expert, and so she's cool.
I would say that the way that the skills transfer from when you are guiding the PTA or a church group is that in both of those roles you have to have integrity and the ability to get everyone who is on a different page on the same page. And so while you're leading a group, you may go through the storm, norm, perform, that at the end of the day when you walk out and you have a decision that you make sure that you're on the same page and that you're delivering the same message and that you speak as one voice.
Consensus builder.
Yes,
that's what you're talking about.
Being a consensus builder. And so I found that that's been very successful with the groups that I've led. And to be honest, when you don't have an answer, to say, you know what, I have no clue. But the good news is, because you are working as a unit, that someone else on the committee may have the expertise that you don't have, and they may say, oh my gosh, I have, and you draw from those other experiences. So that would be the input that I would have.
I think some really good points, and I would agree the skills do translate. I mean, leadership skills are leadership skills. Yes, you are evolving to different levels of complexity, but you do that with just about anything you do. It's the confidence to understand, well, I do have those skills because I did lead the church group or I did lead the PTA. Mm-hmm. And naturally, those skills are going to grow the more you exercise them and the more complex the group is that you're working with. But have the confidence to know that you have those skills. I would say two other things. Hard work. I mean, being prepared to be a leader or leading a group, like so many other things, means preparing. It means doing your homework. I feel confident, not all the time. I feel confident when I've done my homework. When I know I have prepared, I have read the materials, I have, gotten the answers to all the questions I could answer. So being a leader, like so many other things, you know, you have to work hard and be prepared when you come into a meeting. And then I think the final thing I would say, I read somewhere not long ago that the most important thing people expect from their leaders is honesty. That kind of goes back to what was being referenced there. I mean, there are a lot of other skills that are important, but at least in this study, the most important, they expect their leaders to be honest. And I think that's something we can all do. It goes to, if you don't have the information, say you don't. If the reality is something that the group does not want to hear, you still have to present the reality, and you know, don't code it because it's not what they want to hear. But being honest is critical, and certainly we can have that skill.
In your experience, either serving on boards or commissions or in observing people serving on those, when does the dynamic of a group change? Is it when it's more diverse? And I'll put it a little bit differently. Mayor Cleaver, when he met with one of the public forums to talk about his women's initiative, he said that he just got tired of looking out at the meetings and seeing just white guys. So when does the dynamic change? Is it when it's more diverse?
Okay, moving down. You first.
That's got to be a huge part of it. I mean, it has to be. When you're a voice of one, it's very hard to make a difference. But I think it's a couple of different things. Number one, you have to have multiple voices that I believe to be effective. You have to have multiple. First you have to have one voice, but then you have to have multiple voices at the table. And it needs to represent what I would call the complexity of diversity. So just having two white women we don't represent everybody else. I mean we all we can't have every group of us on every board, but we have to have multiple voices. We have to listen and communicate to each other. We have to get allies, whoever they may be. I mean, I tell you, as I call it kind of managing while female, you know that concept, the feeling. And there are times in a meeting when we talk about consensus, I'll go to somebody before a meeting and I will say, let me tell you something. This is the last meeting is the last time that I want to go in and I want to make a point of have somebody divert away from what we all consider to be important, because you got one person who diverts away. You got to bring it back. So I think you have to have the skill sets to be able to create alliances outside the meeting to support inside the meeting the voices of the minorities. And then I include myself in that, in the minority, because I'm going to be the minority in the room. Those aren't all the things, but I think you have to have that kind of complexity met. And then at some point, and then you bring in people who really feel so empowered themselves that they don't let anything stand in their way. If you've got 2 or 3 timid people, you can have 5 timid people, and timid people aren't going to, you've got to have people who are willing to engage as equal. I am an equal in this room, you know? I belong at this table. And so you've got to have all that complexity. And Meg and I spent time, my daughter and I'm like, you've got to feel like your voice deserves to be heard. So all those to me are important.
I think when you look around and you say, what does it mean to have a diverse group, that most people think of age, sex, race. However, it's experiences as well. Because there are different people who in the room who have different levels of experience. And so because someone has a strong skill set in a certain area, they may be intimidated by someone or they may intimidate someone who doesn't have the same expertise. And so as a leader, it's important to realize that that's happening in the room and that you need to balance it. I also believe that diversity, it's with individuals who say, and I will give you an example, serving on NTDF, there is someone who's strong with wanting to have the social impact as far as the return on investment, and there's someone else who wants to have the economic impact as return on investment. And so how do you balance it? And so as a good leader, you have to realize that that's going on with the dynamics in the room and try to make it, smooth it over and make it a win-win for everyone.
I think it also changes when there are when there, and I think this is what's so great about the women's employment. I mean, the Women's Foundation. When you get a group, a catalog, a binder of women that have a lot of skill, that have the actual skill, like the middle.
Yeah.
that have the skill sets you need. I mean, I think in the past, I mean, I've been around a long time, and it was like, oh, I need a woman, I need an Asian, I need an African American, and you'll kind of settle just for somebody who looks like it's, you can look diverse, but you have to find experts among a diverse population. So it's really diminishing to the group just to say, oh, we look like we're diverse. You really need people of all types and ages and economic situations that have specific expertise, because every group does have that depth of experience. And so that's when things really start changing, because then people really do feel like I've got something to offer. And I was on a commission once that Mel Carnahan appointed me to the Commission on the Removal, Retirement, and Discipline of Judges. Ooh. I mean, I thought, what am I doing? I was a nonprofit director, and I thought, that's the craziest committee to put me on, because there were all these attorneys and a judge and everything. But they said, no, we just need somebody with some common sense, and somebody who's not afraid to tell the, not lawyers or judges, somebody with common sense, or somebody who could just look at the system dispassionately and say, wow, that person is really smart, but he just can't make a decision because his caseload, he hasn't decided a case in a year, and he's, so he's not qualified. But, and to take that risk and to say yes to something.
I think I agree with the points. The only thing I would add, I do think it takes a critical mass, to make a significant difference. One person can change the dynamic of a meeting or something if they're really a dynamic person, but ordinarily to make a significant difference, it takes a critical mass, can still be a small group. But I think the point that I think Ann was making, you have to connect. You can't just all be in the room. Okay, so now there are 5 of us in this group of 20. There has to be a connection there for you to be kind of working together. Ann talked about doing that, making a connection outside of meeting, or whether you connect in the meeting, or whether it's eye contact, it kind of we're on the same page. Doesn't mean you're really saying precisely the same thing, but you're connecting about, ways of operating, ways of dialoguing, openness, discussion. I mean, somehow that critical mass has to connect, I think, to really see a change in the dynamic of a group. And it can be challenging to change the dynamic of a group.
So if I hear what you're saying, and what you said in the last answers, preparation doesn't just mean reading the agenda and the minutes and that sort of thing, but it's thinking, what are we going to do at the meeting? And if you need an ally for something, whether you're the chairman of the commission or whatever you're serving on, if you think there's someone there who might agree with you, but it doesn't have the opportunity or doesn't take the opportunity to speak, you call them ahead of time, or you work with them ahead of time?
Yeah, I would say yes. The most effective meetings are those where the most work has been done outside the meeting. And I'm sure Jan can tell you, if you're going to vote on something, you need to know how everybody's voting before you go in the meeting. So that happens before, all that happens before the meeting. Some things less controversial, or you may not be so divided, but if you're the leader, you want to understand where people are before you just throw it out in the meeting.
Well, what about a person that's not a leader, that's serving on the panel?
Who wants to
do
forward a position.
Or to at least participate and feels like their comments are not being heard. Do they go to the chairman one-on-one beforehand, or to someone else on the commission? Because, we're hoping that all these women end up on boards and commissions right away, and there'll be 3 or 4 of them. But the reality is they may be the only one for a while. How do they negotiate or navigate that and still accomplish something, rather than sitting there and waiting for the next woman to come?
Sometimes sitting there and listening is not a bad thing. It's kind of it also could be a negative if you're new on a commission and you think you have to talk a lot and you really don't add much to the conversation. So sometimes sitting back absorbing, listening, kind of understanding the dynamics of the group, but also doing your homework. I mean, I think we've all said you really have to be prepared. You have to know the issue. You have to talk to a lot of people outside of, other people in that, with that interest or that expertise, and, being prepared and, just kind of easing into it sometimes is not a bad thing. I mean, some people are real go-getters and can do that, but if that's not your style, that's okay too.
And I would like to add to that at first you don't feel comfortable taking a lead position as you serve on a commission. But it's really great when you do feel comfortable that there are opportunities for subcommittees that you are able to volunteer to lead those. So you're not necessarily out in the forefront if you don't feel comfortable doing that, but you're in a smaller group and then you work directly with other members of the commission or committee and then the chairperson.
I agree with that, and I think that if you start to, and I think we all agree you have to listen for a while. And I've seen so many effective board members, you don't hear from them the first couple of months they're involved. But then if you don't want to be the person who's advocating the position, you figure out who has positions comparable to yours, similar to yours, and you embrace them. They say something, you validate what they've said. I mean, you're starting to build those alliances and relationships. And then you may go to them outside the meeting and say, I agree with you on this position. How can I help move this position forward? So it doesn't have to be your own agenda or position you're moving forward. It can be somebody else may have a stronger voice than you do, but your voice will help them to be successful on your joint goal.
And if there's something that piques your interest, volunteer to do more research on it. Just say, gosh, I'd really like to know more about that. And then say, I think I can come back and, bring more information about that. And, I think that's another way.
I may come up with other questions, but I want to be sure I get this one. I want each of you to share a story or an experience that demonstrates that results or change for empowering women. So if you can think of a story that would demonstrate that, or an example.
Well, you can't ignore the current one.
Well, that's a good
there
one.
is Mayor James, Sly to all of us, but Mayor James too. I mean, he's saying he will endorse, he will support increasing women and others, but for right now, for this purpose, the involvement of women on commissions and boards. And Kathy and I know that a group of women years ago went to Jefferson City and got the commitment of the governor to increase the number of women judges, and there were virtually none at the time. And once they've made that commitment, they do feel that sense of urgency because they don't want somebody to say they back down on their promise, but they feel that sense of urgency. They become a part of the team to support the expansion of the involvement of different groups of people. And you're right, cultural competency, experience competency, I mean, all the competencies are important. So it's not just race or sex or anything like that. But I think those are the stories for me. It's you get people who are powerful to promise to support the cause.
I think an example for me that's recently here in the Kansas City area is Senator Kiki Curls and her initiative with passing legislation for offenders, drug offenders who've had fewer than 3 offenses to be eligible for the SNAP program, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Program. And I know that she's been working with other women in the city of Kansas City to move forward with that legislation, and it's been successful. I mean, a few weeks ago, Governor Nixon signed that, and so those individuals will be able to have food. So I think that's great, or assistance. I think that's a huge, huge move for Kansas City and the state of Missouri.
Go ahead.
I mean, I guess thinking on a broader scale, there are a number of stories in Kansas City. You think of the founding of the Women's Foundation. There's some women getting together and saying, we need to do this. I mean, women giving to women. The Central Exchange was founded the same way. Small group of, committed, very civically minded women. The Women's Employment Network. So, I mean, there are many examples of a small group of, again, committed, engaged women getting together and saying this is going to happen, and 20 decades later, it has really grown and, you know, flourished, and it's wonderful. I think on a more personal level, I mean, I thought about a couple of boards and at least one commission I've been on where there was another woman on the board or commission, and of course, you know, I'm older, so I've had more experience, who, you know, seemed rather timid, not really speaking up or really hearing her voice. And I kind of just informally tried to serve. I mean, Minter's too strong, but just as the buddy, you know, the buddy to talk with before and after the meeting, and to, you know, a couple of these things I was chairing to make sure that we sought out her opinion. We affirmed, you know, good thought. Thanks for bringing that question. So it's just, again, on a personal level, being that supporting someone else. If you've been there longer, had more experience, really reaching out to support a woman who may be new in that. And then over time, you could really see the change, you know, in those individuals on that board or on their commission as they found their voice. But just helping them to get their footing and feel supported and affirmed in those early stages.
I think the most dramatic thing in my recent experience is last term in the city council, we had a majority of women on the city council. And so that had never happened before. And many of us had been very involved in the Women's Political Caucus. And I think 3 of us were former presidents of the Women's Political Caucus. But again, that's women who are trying to get other women elected. And you know, it was really very, that was record breaking in Kansas City to have 7 out of the 12 council members be women. Now, women, we only have 3 on the council now, and all 3 of us are termed out. And so there is the possibility that in the next council, we will have no women, and that frightens me. So we have some good women who are running, but, you know, I just encourage you also, you know, to step up sometimes, you know, in the political arena, because that was pretty special to have 7 out of 12 women. And I don't think we wielded our power as a block, you know, like you might think, but we had that common history. I think mainly through the Women's Political Caucus and a lot of the causes that we had worked on for many years. So that was pretty special.
I'm going to ask Kat Larison to give an overview of the application process. And then when she's finished, I'm going to come back and ask for questions from you all to this group.
Thank you. So you might be wondering, what does this project actually mean? I'm inspired. But anyway, so for us, along with the partnership, we are a talent bank to a resource for the mayor to find women. And then for women, we are a resource and advocate to the mayor. So the mayor's office reaches out to us for recommendations for qualified applicants, and we in turn submit names of appointment project applicants. So what this means for you, you apply to the project through our website, which the link is on the agenda if you have one, or if you don't, there's some more outside the door, which is 2-part. So a brief form on our website, and then an email submission of your resume and references. You can also take a look at the list of boards and commissions on the mayor's website. That link is also on the agenda, as well as there's a handout you can pick up.
There's a huge number of boards.
There is huge, yeah. Huge. And it's very diverse interest areas. And so if there's anything that you're particularly interested in working on, you can let us know about that at the time. Otherwise, you can tell from your resume what might be a good fit. But once a position opens up that suits your qualifications, we reach out to you, and if you're interested, we submit your name as a candidate for appointment. And it's at that time that you should apply also to the mayor's office, which sounds daunting, but it's once you've gone through applying to our project, it's actually easier to apply to the mayor's. So it's very simple. And then the mayor's office takes it from there, and we'll let you know if you've been selected for appointment. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, we're here, and if you don't have the answers, we can point you in the right direction.
So that's a lot in a hurry.
A lot in a hurry.
But in essence, you send all of your information to the Women's Foundation rather than having to look through all those different. I was overwhelmed by the list of the names. So The Women's Foundation is going to figure out what's coming up for appointment and look at the qualifications that you've submitted. So they're going to kind of help you figure that out and then contact you and say, this is one you might be interested in. So it's kind of, what did you call it? A bank? Talent bank.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just putting your name in this talent bank, and as you told me, it worked very well. They called and said, here it is.
But too fast, I had to go out of town.
It's too fast. Have you done it yet?
I'm focusing on that.
That is excellent.
No, and another point is that it is a rolling basis because positions open up. Sometimes it's because it's the end of the term. Sometimes some people resign for one reason or another. So they're kind of unpredictable at times, and it is rolling. So once we have your application, we have your application. So if we submitted your name along with some others, and the mayor didn't select you for a particular spot, you didn't go anywhere. We will continue to submit you as a good candidate.
And there are lots of places that you can use the internet if you don't have access to the internet. And where we are right now, the public library is one place. So there's lots of opportunities to do that. You'll only have to do it once until the mayor's office says, we want this person, and then you'll get to submit it. And do they submit the same thing to the mayor's office?
It's just a form on the mayor's website,
Okay.
which is very similar. You will have submitted all of the information that form asks for. So you have to do any new.
Is it hard?
No, very simple. I believe I did put my resume on the mayor's as well. I had to upload it. But I do want to express something that did surprise me a little bit was the background check. Probably because of the finance and fiduciary responsibility. But not that there was anything to hide. But I was a little surprised with, I have to fill out forms to consent for a background check. It went through. But just to make women aware of that and not to be turned off from it, but just be prepared for it. And then the other thing I thought was also very interesting, this administration, I'm sure it changes administration to administration, does ask for your letter of resignation, just undated.
Oh, wow.
And that's in case, you decide or something happens and, but these are just little tidbits that, that's different. But otherwise it was a seamless process, and my first board meeting is tomorrow at 12 noon.
That's good.
So, do you have questions of our panel? Yes.
I was just interested, what's the level of commitment if you're someone that works on the outside and you're interested in volunteering? How many hours do you use?
All right, the question is, what's the level of commitment? If you've got a day job, what do I expect that I'm going to have to give?
Well, it varies by position.
But I think she wanted.
Well, I was just going to say, the board I'm on meets once a month. But again, there's that side homework. The state of Missouri this year, in the last legislative session, passed a law that said board members on retirement boards across the country are now required to have, I forgot the exact number of hours of education every year. So it does mean I have to, personally would have to use vacation time to go off to a training session. But these are things that, it's okay, I know to factor that in to my business life. But right now my meetings are once a month, about 2 to 3 hours. But I tell your employer, okay, I'm going to take a half a day once a month.
I would like to add that on the Neighborhood Tourism Development Committee, that the time level commitment varies. I am fortunate enough to work in a position where giving back to the community is very important. And so I get 40 hours of time per year. However, I exceed that, and I also have to take vacation time. Quarterly, we may have 142 applications that come in for a tourism fund event. That means that we have 5 minutes to listen to the presentation, 5 minutes for Q&A. Of course, that's not the reality of it, right? And then we meet as a committee to deliberate. And so for the quarterly, it could take 4 days to go through that 141 application process, and then we meet quarterly. In addition to that, I take time off to go to the Finance Committee and present the ordinance with the city staff to share with, for approval, and then it escalates. And then there are times where we need to, we don't necessarily agree with the council members, or they don't agree with us, and so we have dialogue. And that's not, it's our committee, but we have dialogue and work through that. So it's extensive time. And I will also share that there's one step further, because as you are granting money, you want to make sure that the funding is being spent in the right way. And so I spend a lot of my social time going to the events to make sure that our money is spent correctly. So I will go and say, where's our logo? Is it on the ticket? How many people are here? I talk with people and say, where are you from? What brought you here? And then we move forward, because always what's on the application is not necessarily, it's embellished, I should say. You're welcome.
Other questions?
Yes. How politically skilled do you need to be effective?
To be effective or?
To be effective on
Okay. Jan, that's.
Well, political with a small p, I think. Just political as in negotiating with other people, and I don't know. You don't have to have any particular political alliance with a city council member or the mayor, but I think that just being political in the fact of you can get along with people and you can try to negotiate your point of view, I think is helpful. And if you don't have it right away, you can. It's certainly a skill that you'll learn.
Do you need support from your council
No.
person in order to
No.
be on these boards or commissions? Okay.
It's the mayor's choice. I mean, we often though send names to the mayor. So if there's somebody who you meet, they say, "Oh, I'd love to do something." We used to send an email to anybody on the mayor's staff, to Joni, or even the mayor, and just say, "Here's somebody that I think you might take a look at." But it's certainly not necessary, to do that. But he certainly appreciates all of our input and anybody's input. Recommending yourself or recommending someone you think would be good. Like you say, there's a lot of positions to fill, and it would be hard to know that many qualified people.
So you need a bank of qualified people.
Right.
Other questions? Yes.
I work in a partisan political field, and I was wondering how partisan politics may affect somebody's chances of being on a board or commission.
We're totally nonpartisan, so we don't really ask, anything about your political
That's one of the
persuasions.
wonderful things about the city.
Right.
It is a nonpartisan.
They say
But
potholes are not Republican or
questions to
Democrat.
ask.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even though organizations say they're nonpartisan, they are. So, excellent question.
But there are some people who are very, zealous in their political opinions, and they may or may not be a very productive member of a group. So if you can keep your politics in check, and just make sure that you're not there just to kind of get your political persuasion, approved. So.
And if you're on one of the higher profile boards, and do have, a controversial kind of engagement or involvement outside of the commission or the board, that can bleed over and come up. I think of a park board member a few years ago, but generally it's nonpartisan, but someone involved in something real controversial outside it can impact.
Probably why those background checks are done.
Did that answer your question? Others, I saw somebody else's. Yes.
This is maybe more towards Kat. I understand that there's a residency requirement. Is that?
It also varies by position.
That's what my question was. If you are, a business owner in Kansas City, but you might not necessarily meet the residence requirement if you're on other boards. I mean, is that something that you guys take into consideration?
There are requirements when it's set forth by ordinance. That it must be, that the makeup of the board is this this person from this area and, confined to Kansas City or not. And then the mayor's viewpoint is that a lot of the issues that come before these boards and commissions affect both sides of the state line. So beyond that, he's open to considering people who are not necessarily Kansas City, Missouri residents.
There is,
shouldn't be a deterrent.
there is an issue, there's a resolution, I think it's a resolution or ordinance before the Finance Committee Wednesday to open up that process a little more, because we have had really a proclivity toward Kansas City, Missouri residents, but we're looking at that. He's listening. So.
Others?
All boards and commissions are very important. However, do you have an opinion on where the more powerful decisions are made, or where you need to have more heavyweights? Are there some where you can sort of start and work your way up in terms of political acumen?
Oh gosh, there's so
I think they all have impact in their different manners. I mean,
There's so
they're
many,
all
though.
impactful.
I think there are plenty of places to
Yeah.
work your way up. I wouldn't try and start with the park board.
Right.
That is, considered a very choice board, and they have a lot of power, over parks and boulevard system. So that one, a lot of people are after. But most of them, I mean, there are a lot of others. There's plenty of room to start small and work your way up.
Which board has the most impact, or boards and commissions have the most impact on the economy, on the economic development?
PIAC.
That's a good one.
Well, yeah, the Public Improvement Advisory, that's not a board, that's an appointment by the council, but,
The TIF commission's, I think, a good
Yeah.
one. The, Tax Increment Finance Commission.
Economic Development Corporation, but that's a board, but that's not, the mayor doesn't, well, I guess now he may appoint that. We've changed the whole structure of the Economic Development Corporation.
If you go just to economics, I defer. But one of the groups that I'm really excited about is the Healthcare Foundation. And it has representatives who are appointed by the mayor, representatives who are elected within the group, and I think there are other thoughts. But that's where money is divided up among a variety of the programs. It includes nutrition, it includes mental health, it includes, almost everything you can identify as related to health, and including dental care. And to me, if you want to have a strong community, it helps to have a healthy community in every way. So I would put that on the list of groups that I consider to be really invaluable, that may not otherwise be thought of by us.
And we're looking at the arts as an economic development strategy. So if you're interested in the arts, we're really trying to promote our cultural amenities as economic development bonuses for the neighbors, for the residents, and for the visitors. So it's really, that's become very important.
This isn't so much a question as just maybe an observation comment, but a lot of these boards and commissions are public meetings, and
They all should be.
right.
They are. Sunshine.
Unless there's something that you have to go to executive session over. But so I always encourage people who are interested to go sit in on a couple of meetings. And find the time. It might mean it's a middle of the day, and it might mean having to take vacation time if you're working, but to sit in on a couple of meetings and just see how the committee works, how the meeting is conducted, get a feel of the committee, the board, the commission.